Hello, John Bloodworth Gentleman Crafter here with some more explorations into mixed media. This time around I'm going to be creating a canvas, and I've been experimenting this week with creating my own collage papers on things like rice paper, foundation paper and also tracing paper. I'm going to use one of the foundation paper ones for this. Basically it feels like a rice paper, and I've hand stamped a design all over it with a text stamp and a butterfly stamp using archival ink. I'm going to prime the canvas with some transparent gesso, so not white gesso, and then I'm going to use that to stick the collage paper to the canvas. I'm using a brayer to press it down firmly, and then I'm giving a good layer of transparent gesso over the top as well. Brushing it as thinly as I can, but evenly as well. And then I'm tearing away the top and the bottom, and I'm sealing those with a bit of the transparent gesso as well. Because it's so thin, it will dry quite quickly, but I'm going to give it a quick blast with the heat tool just to really sort of set it in place. Next up, I am going to get the white gesso out, but I'm going to give the canvas a spritz of water first so that the gesso is diluted as I spread it over the canvas. And this is basically to tone down the collage paper a little bit, and to blend the edges of it with the canvas. Now, spoiler alert, later on you'll probably not see much of this collage paper, but the whole concept really is to have some form of pattern. Again, using the heat tool to quickly heat set that layer. Doesn't take long because again it's so thin, not thick. Some more transparent gesso to stick down a die cut of a doily, and then spreading it all over the top to seal it down and also make it waterproof, because I'm going to use some water-based mediums later on. A quick heat set of that. You can use a hairdryer, obviously, if you don't have a heat tool. It's just really to speed the drying process. Doing the same thing with a butterfly. Not a real one, just a die cut of one. And then I'm using some bookbinding glue to stick down some die cut letters, which are my chosen sentiment for this particular canvas. You don't have to include a word. You could have put the butterfly in the centre of the doily if you would like. The reason I'm using the bookbinding glue is for precision application on this occasion. I am still going to give it a coating of transparent gesso. Excuse me. And again, heat set that. Now I'm back in with the white gesso this time. I'm back in with the white gesso, but this time I haven't watered it down, and I've not applied any water to the canvas. So as you can see, it's a lot more opaque, but it's still translucent. So I'm picking up detail from the collage paper, but it's whitening out the canvas. And again, heat setting that. And then I went on to do a few layers of this. The theory behind this was basically a gradual toning of all of the elements. At least that was the plan. Now I'm going on with some wax paste with a shaving brush to pick out some of the detail on the doily. Heat setting that with the heat tool. I did actually accidentally get some of the wax paste elsewhere on the canvas, so I had to go back in with the white gesso to try and cover that up. And then I've got some Distress Oxide spray, just spritzing that over to give a blush of colour. Now, although I am heat setting this here, there actually wasn't much point, because I'm going to be coming in with some water soon, and that will actually reactivate the distress spray. I'm also going on with some watercolour pastels, and then, as you can see, in with the water, and then spreading this out with a paintbrush. There was a bit too much going on here, so I started taking it off with the loo roll, and then basically dabbed it off with the loo roll. Spritzed again just to dilute it a bit, and then tilted the canvas around so that it spread very, very thinly. Now, back in with the heat tool. This took a little bit longer, obviously, because there was so much water going on. But it gave a nice result because all of the colour really had sunk into all of the recesses, and on areas with not much texture it gave a sort of very soft pastel blush to the colour scheme. Now back in with some watercolour pastels, this time pink. I was going to go for that sort of coral orange colour, but I changed my mind in the end. Again, activating this with water and spreading it. In all directions by the looks of it. And then to set that in place so that it wouldn't activate with water again, I mixed on some transparent gesso. Now you can see with this, the colour tends to spread quite smoothly, and I'm basically taking off some of the gesso and the water as well with the brush by painting it onto a piece of cardstock. Back in with the heat tool to set that layer. Now next up, back in with some more gesso. Again, this was basically to tone back the colour. Whenever I work on canvases and things like this mixed media, I like to sort of work in lots of different layers of medium, just purely because that really helps bring out some of the detail of the foreground elements and tone back. As you can see, that basically black and white collage paper now is almost let's say sunk into the background. Now I'm spattering on some of that Distress Oxide spray and some white paint, and this is basically like layering, I guess. So I've toned back the background and the detail. This is adding some more detail on the top. And now I'm basically mixing some of that Distress Oxide with transparent gesso. I think I ended up with a bit too much of the Distress spray liquid, but the whole idea really was to prevent it from being water activated. And I'm basically spreading that across the elements that sit in the foreground. And this ties it colour-wise with the spattering in the background. There's method to my madness. I thought I might try mixing in some of the water-soluble pastel, but that didn't quite work, so I manually mixed it on the Teflon sheet, and that just added a bit more richness to the colour. Okay, drying all of that off. And then I had some metallic paint, which I mixed again with transparent gesso and a tiny bit of water, and the idea was to form a glaze. So something that would go on but not affect the colour underneath. It would have helped if I hadn't used the same paintbrush I'd just been painting the pink on with, but there you go. Okay, next up I went in with some some white gesso and a smaller paintbrush, just to sort of start bringing back some of the foreground detail. My goal here isn't to fill the top layer of those die cuts, because I'm going to do something else with that in just a moment. It's basically to sort of add a bit of a lighter tone to that central area, because in my mind it was getting a bit dark. I know it's pastel, but it was dark for pastel. Now again, a rough brush, and just trying to dry brush on some of that wax paste, the pink coloured waxed paste. Again, with the goal of picking out some detail. By the way, I never have a plan when I start these. I kind of just wing it. So if anything doesn't work, it's because it probably shouldn't have. Dry brushing on some white acrylic paint here to tone back some of that intense pink, and again to try and knock back some of the colour in the background. And then again some of that metallic, this time undiluted. And then a quick edit while things dried. And I was spattering on some of that white ink or paint, whatever it is. I don't know, it cost 10 quid for that little jar. I actually haven't looked at what it is. I really should. And then spattering on some more of that oxide, again, just to bring things together. Now I had some extra die cuts of the ones that I used originally, and I'm basically going to glue those straight on top. And this gives the nice stark white against the sort of blush pink background. Again, using the bookbinding glue, mostly because it's quick drying, low moisture, and also will stick to pretty much any surface, so sticking it to the acrylic paints isn't a problem. And I'm using that acrylic block to sort of hold things down so that they dry flat. Now I'm using some dimensional medium here, just to add a few raised dots, and then I'm not going to show it just because you don't want to see me fiddling with gems, but I'm actually going to add some gems with that bookbinding glue interspersed with these larger dots. And they're the gems that I'm going to use, the little mini ones. And there we go, there's the finished piece. I hope you've enjoyed this week's exploration in mixed media and will join me again next week. Thanks for watching.